The song that Buddy just played is one that was in Liz's piano repertoire, as were several of the other pieces that we're listening to and playing today. I welcome you and thank you for being here today as we mourn the death of Liz Bergmann and celebrate her life. If we are lucky, we all get a chance during our life to know people who make us feel better just for having known them. And if we are really lucky, we will recognize this goodness and try to pass it along to others. But one thing is certain, no one, not any of us, entering this world can escape the cost of living. The price we pay is this: to live in this world, we must accept that someday we will have to die. To love what is alive, we must accept having to lose what we've made precious through our care. To be fully and fiercely human, we must accept having to be breakable and sometimes broken. When we stop to notice how those who came before us gave us a path and a little light to see by, it encourages us to help carry that light forward. Though each of us carries forth in this world a small flame, we know that the ability of that light to brighten the world depends upon the many others who learn to walk with it in their hearts. We light our chalice today to honor the life and living of one of those lights, Liz Bergmann. The song that Mary and I are about to sing, Turn, 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 written by Pete Seeger with words from Ecclesiastes, was one that Liz enjoyed, so we'll sing it today in her memory, recognizing that there is a time for everything under heaven.
Everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace. A time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing.
I'd like to start by reading the obituary that was put together by Liz's family, as it helps provide some useful context and information about her and her life. Elizabeth Bergmann, aged 85, passed away peacefully on December 2nd following a short bout of acute cardiac illness. Beloved wife to the late Carl Bergmann, loving mother of children Beverly Hammer of Towson, Maryland, and William Bergmann of Arlington, Virginia, mother-in-law to Seth Hammer and Stacy Bergmann, dear grandmother to Carly Bergmann, Emma Hammer, Isabel Hammer, Anna Vasquez, and Christina Gallo, and numerous nephews and nieces and great-grandchildren. She was born in Buffalo, New York, to Daniel F. Moran and Edna Madison Moran, and sibling to the late Michael Moran, survived by Liz's sister-in-law, Sylvia Moran. Liz grew up in Kenmore, New York, and attended the State University of New York at Potsdam, where she earned a degree in education. She met her husband Carl in Schenectady, New York, while she was working there as a teacher. After they were married, Liz and Carl lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for a couple of years before moving here to Mount Lebanon. Liz earned a master's degree in library science from the University of Pittsburgh and worked as a school and community librarian, and then for many years at the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh. She enjoyed music, playing the piano, and reading in her spare time. And one fact I recently learned was that she also enjoyed yodeling, which is not something I'd associated with Liz before. Liz and Carl were early founders of this congregation, the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunny Hill, and spent considerable time here and elsewhere with various groups and friends over the course of many years. Coffee hour was a favorite activity, as well as volunteer commitments. They also enjoyed traveling throughout the United States, visiting relatives, to Europe, and attending elder hostels in later years. Her characteristic sense of humor, independent spirit, and desire to learn continued throughout her life. In recent years, she lived at the Concordia of the South Hills retirement community in Mount Lebanon. There she enjoyed music activities, films, history talks, book groups, theater, and library outings, serving on the food committee, and dinners with friends. Visits with her children and extended family were greatly anticipated and enjoyed, as well as Deep Creek Lake vacations with her children and grandchildren. We will miss her sweet and kind voice. When I think of Liz Bergmann, there are a number of admirable personal qualities that come to my mind. But those that stand out for me are some of the things that I think of as hallmarks of the people of her generation. They include always showing up. Also, a commitment to learning the entire span of your life, and a strong do-it-yourself attitude toward everything. At Sunny Hill, Liz was a steadfast and reliable presence for decades, since 1967. At nearly every church service until very recently, every potluck, every congregational meeting, you could pretty much count on Liz being there. And not just being there, but being prepared to participate fully in whatever the group was engaged in. And that do-it-yourself attitude that I mentioned is part of the reason why we are here as a church. Liz and Carl were among the group of early church founders who decided if the churches that are here don't suit us, if they don't reflect our own values, then we will start one that does. And amazingly, they did just that. And here we are, some 58 years later, beneficiaries of both the steadfastness and the resourcefulness of Liz and Carl and others like them. Carl and Liz lived in the Sunset Hills neighborhood of Mount Lebanon for most of their lives together and raised their children at their house on Briarwood Drive, just 2 blocks away from where I now live with my own family. Family, I know, was extremely important to Liz, and I know that she so much looked forward to the family get-togethers, especially those trips to Deep Creek Lake, which took place, I think, pretty much every year. And I know that all of Liz's family members would attest to her great love of family and her delight in spending time with the people she loved the most. Liz and Carl first became involved with Sunny Hill, as I said, in 1967 after meeting Sunny Hill member Irwin Jones, while Carl was participating in the MBA program at Pitt, which was sponsored by Westinghouse for their employees. Irwin invited Liz and Carl to attend, which they did, and they soon became very involved in the church in a variety of capacities. Both Carl and Liz were active participants in our small group ministry programs, and I know that some of you who are present today from Sunny Hill have participated in various circles and groups with them. These groups are part of the glue that keeps our congregation connected through deep sharing and listening. Liz and Carl were also active participants in our LifeCraft discussion groups, which met each Sunday after the service, including the current events group, which has just recently restarted, the science and spirituality group, and several others, as well as book discussion groups and more. In fact, not long before her final illness, Liz had mentioned wanting to come back sometime to participate in the current events group again. Liz was a letter writer, something that is becoming more and more lost art. I received several cards and at least one letter from Liz, which she wrote after Carl's memorial service. Although I did not know her to be an emotionally effusive individual during in-person interactions, her letters and notes were very kind and sweet and meant a great deal to the people who received them, including me. Liz, of course, loved to read. She read books and magazines and journals and just about anything that she could get her hands on. As I mentioned earlier, she was committed to the idea and practice of lifelong learning, and reading was her primary way of taking in new information. Even when she was in the hospital not long before her death, she was interested in reading and learning more. Carl and Liz were very active in classes that were held at the Mount Lebanon Library, in part because of Liz having been a librarian and being strongly committed to the idea of public libraries. Almost every time my wife would go to the library in our first few years here, she'd come back and say, "I saw the Bergmanns at the library again today." They were members of a salon discussion group there and participated in a great many classes on almost every imaginable subject. Part of the history of this congregation can be seen in the quilts that hang on the back and side wall of our sanctuary. Every 5 years since the congregation was founded, families have been given the opportunity to contribute a quilt square that becomes part of the larger quilt that reflects what was going on at the congregation at the time the quilt was made. One of the quilts from 1990, I believe, contains a square that Liz contributed, and you can see a picture of it here on our screens. You can also find it on one of the quilts on the side wall over there. As you can see, it is a coffee cup, which is the Unitarian equivalent of a communion cup from other religious traditions. Liz wrote of this quilt square, "The coffee cup recognizes our favorite ritual of touching base with one another during coffee hour." Those moments of touching base with one another are so important to us as human beings. One of the biggest challenges I found during the pandemic shutdown was being unable to have those in-person moments where we could check in with one another and experience firsthand the lovely warmth of being in one another's presence. It's something that I will never again take for granted. So Liz was right to memorialize this tradition in her quilt square. My wife Marta said to me a few years ago that she hoped we can be like Carl and Liz when we retire, always active, always going to new classes, always trying to learn new things. And I agree, what a wonderful way to live, always. The last time I saw Liz was when she attended a memorial service here at Sunny Hill for a longtime member, Nancy Bellamy, in October, about 3 months ago, I think. After the service, she asked me about one of the readings that she particularly liked, and I'm going to share it with you now as it seems particularly appropriate. It's Meditations Before Kaddish from the Mishkan Tefillah, a prayer book from the Reformed Jewish tradition. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not your mind. You can love me best by letting hands touch hands and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. I hope and pray that each of us might aspire to live as Liz did, curious about life, kind to those we meet, steadfast and resourceful in good times and in bad, pilgrims of a world forever new. May it be so. Amen. Liz's granddaughter, Isabel, will now play one of Liz's favorite tunes, Amazing Grace, which I understand she also often played on piano. Thank you, that was beautiful. We're going to hear now from several of Liz's family members with memories and stories, beginning with her son, Bill.
So Reverend McGaw mentioned my mom was a librarian, and she was very well read and loved literature and culture. She did take pride in her Irish heritage and used to point out that while we have statues of sports figures and war heroes in our country and the town squares, Ireland has statues of poets and authors in theirs. She liked playing the piano and enjoyed music of all kinds. She especially liked folk and classical music, and later in life she particularly enjoyed playing Name That Tune with her many friends at Concordia, which was her retirement home, and where she enjoyed living in the later stages of her life. She was a free spirit in many ways, like her mother. One of the things that my family noticed about her was that she was always humming and singing. When she would visit us, she liked to sit down and spontaneously play the song English Country Garden on our piano, to the delight of her grandchildren and later her great-grandchildren. She also mastered a much more daunting tune, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Why, you ask? The Battle Hymn of the Republic? Because as children, we attended the Julia Ward Howe Elementary School here in Mount Lebanon. Julia Ward Howe was both an abolitionist and a woman's right advocate during the Civil War, so my mother definitely approved of her. During that time, Miss Howe also composed the famous song, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. So as children, we were treated to renditions of this song on the piano, and I feel confident in saying that I am a member of the select group of people that would consider this song as one of their cherished childhood memories. Mom was a resourceful and a positive person. One of her favorite phrases to tell us was to always hope for the best but expect the worst. She always taught us to make the best of things. My family noticed that she has always showed empathy towards others, and she was always full of lots of tips that she liked to share with others. These range from tips on life in general to how to make cranberry sauce. She also liked sponge candy at Tops Supermarket in Buffalo and wintergreen lifesavers, and was sure to share this with her children and grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren as well. She was the ultimate caring mother in many ways. No matter what happened, Mom was always there for us. I remember participating in sports events as a child. While other moms might buttonhole the coach and demand more playing time for their child, my mom would say to me, "You look like you're playing hard out there. Why don't you tell that coach you need a break?" Mom never took sports too seriously and would console us after any losses by saying, "Just remember, it's only a game." This attitude extended to professional football as well, and made her a bit of an outlier in her native Buffalo and adopted city of Pittsburgh, where there are many passionate fans. I understand that Buffalo is actually playing in a football playoff game right now, and I appreciate that my relatives from Buffalo are attending this service instead. I know that Mom would thank you as well, but I also have the feeling she might be looking at us down at us right now and just having a bit of a slight chuckle as well at the scheduling conflict. Her unique perspective and love of literature also extended to parenting. There's a poem that she liked by the poet Max Ehrmann called Desiderata. First line goes, "Go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence." As children, when we were having a tantrum, she used to repeat this line to us. Now, I will say that this particular method of child management was not always effective, and reciting such heady poetry oftentimes did little to calm down a ranting child. But I do think it had a long-term effect on us. As I grew older, I did learn to appreciate the words of that poem. Having her children be well-rounded and open-minded was important to my mom, and part of that was sharing her love of travel with us. As children, we made many trips to Buffalo to see our grandparents, our aunt and uncle, our cousins, and our many other relatives, some of whom are here today. We also visited the family farm in upstate New York and heard wild tales of the farm, including horses bucking people, eyeballs allegedly popping out of their sockets, but luckily those same eyeballs allegedly being popped right back in. Those trips to Buffalo are some of my fondest memories. My parents also decided we should visit our relatives on the Bergmann side, who were scattered across the country but primarily based in Missouri. So we took a 2.5-week road trip as children to do this. If you have ever seen the movie National Lampoon's Family Vacation starring Chevy Chase, that is pretty much what we did. One of the scenes of that movie is the family is driving through Kansas where there's not a lot to do. Chevy Chase says, "Kids, who wants to see the world's largest house of mud?" I always got a kick out of that scene because that is basically what we lived in real life. During our tour through Kansas, we did in fact visit the world-famous Sod House Museum. We also visited the old Bergmann family store in Concordia, Missouri during that trip and got to connect with many of our relatives on that side of the family, and we appreciate some of them coming today. As my childhood progressed through high school, I wound up hanging out with a group of friends that called ourselves the Wild Mustangs. And even though we engaged in a bit too many hijinks for our own good and occasionally got in some trouble for it, Mom was still there to simultaneously chastise us and support us at the same time. Thanks, Mom. I said earlier that having children be well-rounded and open-minded was important to my mom. Bringing us to this church as children was a big part of that. This church has been a big part of her life and meant a lot to her, and I want to thank Reverend McGaw and the Caring Committee for supporting us during this difficult time. Mom, thank you for being an amazing mother and for everything that you have done for me. You will be greatly missed, and may you rest in peace.
Next, we'll hear from Liz's son-in-law, Seth, who will share something written by Beverly as well as himself.
So first I'm going to read Beverly's remembrance here, and then I'll share my own here. But first, Beverly wanted to thank everyone for all their kind words and support by emails, calls, messages, relatives, and I just wanted to thank everybody for coming today and watching on the Sunny Hill YouTube. So that was a real benefit too. Growing up, Beverly remembers her mother recalling Buffalo winters and the ice skating. And this is one of these activities that she passed along, as well as the gift of nature appreciation. She had outings to picnics, rivers, and lakes. Beyond that, she played piano music, regularly playing the songs. And we get back to His Truth is Marching On, so it made more of an impression. Amazing Race, Bendemeer Stream, and other selections from the piano book. There was this fireside book of folk songs. So if anybody's been to the house, that's kind of a central part there. Later favorites include more folk music, country music, bluegrass, central music, as well as the classical. And she just wanted to make sure she has a neighborhood childhood friend when she thinks back to these books, who is watching on YouTube, Sunny Hill YouTube, who related how much he appreciated Beverly's mom's presence, her support, and inclusion in her childhood days. So just send, her good childhood friend. We know she's watching on YouTube today, and Beverly just wanted to make sure that she included that, knowing just how much it was appreciated. She liked reading all topics and liked to get her news and information from a variety of sources, and sometimes that made for interesting conversations. She cared deeply about her children and grandchildren's well-being. She's always asking about their days and happenings, and she was the biggest cheerleader when we were adopting Isabel. And more recently, just what she's doing now, in her later years, she loved listening to her music. She always tried to see the glass as half full, which is particularly notable in her recent years. Beverly also mentions the Desiderata, and also there's the Journey of 1,000 Miles, begins with a single step. And these sayings, not only did she repeat, but they're even hanging on our walls at home. When faced with a challenging situation, one of her memorable pieces of advice was, "Don't rule out the possibility of fun." Okay, so and she had many fond memories of visiting in Pittsburgh in the summer and Christmas, and these include Idlewild Park, South Park picnics, the Nature Reserve, Phipps Flower Show, cookie bakes, museums, and backyard meals. And she remembers one trip when we were driving back to Pittsburgh from Buffalo, and Emma, who was then about 3 years old, she said, "Grandma's house, drive faster," right? So So that's always something, great memory. More recently at Deep Creek Lake, she liked to explain about the boat lines and docking the boat from her long ago summers at Alexandria Bay in New York State, where she learned those skills. She passed on the gift of nature appreciation. There was also the encouraged wildflower walks, and she had this golden book in hand that allowed her to ID flowers. She enjoyed all things flowers, birds, and water. She liked adventures. More recently, there was a Niagara Falls boat ride under the falls, and then there's a vigorous hike exploring the old mines of Western Maryland. At her retirement community, in addition to the many activities she enjoyed, she very much appreciated and loved seeing the amazing wooded areas and sunsets from her apartment. Quite a treat from the view there. She wanted to also, Beverly, special thanks here to her neighbors and longtime friends Lee and Bob Ferrero, Gloria Peterson, Mary Lou Marr, and all the others she hasn't mentioned, but she wants to thank them all for their friendship, support, and fun, especially during the past 5 years and prior to that as well at the retirement community where she lived in Mount Lebanon. She concludes by saying she misses her mom's insights and kindness and her daily chats, and she has many fond memories of them. If I just add one thing about the fond chats, I mean, it really was something. You'd see, she's concluded, but if I just add an editorial comment, I mean, really, just at the end, she would just always call her mom, and they would talk. It was just such a beautiful thing to see, every night, but they would talk. And not perfunctory talk. They would talk, it's just nice. It was just, just as they got older, just to see it. All right, so now I'll share mine. Share my thoughts. As the son-in-law, and it's, I've known her more than 30 years, so it goes back a ways. And, one of the things, about Liz is, you don't get to choose your relatives. And, I've always considered myself very fortunate to have had Liz as my mother-in-law. And, it came across pretty quickly that she was a good, a fun, good-humored person, and even when she had a complaint, and I'm going to get to that in a second, I'll say, sometimes she could complain, but she was a really good, fun person, and you could just, how that would come through, and just give you an example. One of my first memories was when Beverly and I started dating. Again, it goes back more than 30 years. Went for a ride with, I don't remember where we were going, but I was going for a ride, and Carl was driving, and Liz was in the passenger seat. And if anybody who knows Liz reasonably well enough and been in a car ride, she's a bit of a nervous passenger, right? Carl! So 30-some years later, I still remember that. Carl! All right, so this is my first ride together with them, and I'm saying, look out, what is going on? And Carl had more of an adventurous spirit to his driving. So anyway, it was not the best driving combination. And so it's my first time out with them, and I'm saying, oh my God, what am I getting into? And I'm taking a look at this, and they're going out on the ride, and I said, what's this going to be like when we get there? All right, so finally we arrived safely. I have no idea I don't remember where this trip was, but that was like my first memory. And so we get there, so what do I see? I see Liz. She just kind of takes a deep breath, and I see her kind of peer over at Carl, and they just both start to laugh. It was just no big deal. I think, all right, this is going to be the rest of the day is ruined, and here we are, and it's just all right, yes, I think she recognized, I'm a nervous passenger. We got here safely, and she just, instead of staying mad, they just laughed. He laughed, and I could say, boy, what a great pair. And, they just, they could just go through this, and that was just kind of my first, first view of kind of her personality. And it's kind of I think of, another thought that you have is oftentimes you say, how it's the little things that torture you, the little things that make you crazy. And that was just not the case. That was just not the, not the case with Liz. So she had a sense of adventure, and before I get to sense of adventure, I want to talk about not letting the little things make you crazy. One of the things Liz liked to do, she liked to get to places on time. She was kind of the position that, it's the respectful thing to do. You're expected to be there at a certain time, totally rational. Nevertheless, Beverly and I, throughout the years, despite our best efforts, maybe it's not fair to say despite our best efforts, but we tried, right? And just year after year, you say, is this going to change? You see these self-repeating patterns, and Liz would get worked up. Come on, and this would go on for years. But every time, once it was done, whether we'd be, most of the time we actually landed up getting there on time, but it was just with unnecessary stress. But when it was over, she'd just laugh about it. It was no big deal. And I always admired that so much, because so many people, they let this stuff get to them, and she really had this ability. She had this ability to kind of, roll with things. Yeah, at first she'd get worked up, whether it be this or that, but, right afterwards she'd calm herself down, and, and you could see that kindness and the laughter, and it's something that always appreciated. So the other point I want to make is about that sense of adventure. Bill mentioned the mining trip. We're at Deep Creek Lake, right? And so, I think it's just nice to share these things that I remember about her, and I think it kind of encapsulates, again, the type of person that she was. So we were on this tour to go to this abandoned mine at Deep Creek Lake, and it was a group tour with about 30 people. I guess it may be 5 years ago or so, and so, moving a little slower to begin with. But we got up there, and then on our way back, apparently we stopped maybe a few too many times to smell the flowers, so to speak, and suddenly there was no sign of the group, right? This was a group tour with 30 people, and it wasn't meant to be real vigorous. I mean, there are people there with kids, and it wasn't that far, but somehow we had managed to lose the group of 30 people on this tour to this old abandoned mine. So I'm starting to get worked up, because I'm not really worried that we're going to get caught that we're going to be abandoned in Deep Creek Lake. We weren't that far away. I didn't want to make the phone call to the lodge. Excuse me, we're lost from it was just kind of embarrassing. So we didn't want to go down that road. But anyway, ultimately we did find our way back, and say all's well ends well, that sort of thing. But at the end of the vacation, we asked Liz, what was your favorite part of the Deep Creek vacation? And what do you think? Our adventure to the mine. So she said, yeah, that was very exciting. So she certainly, there were so many things that would just, she'd make you smile. And like I just say, through all the things, through good and bad, it's easy enough to smile through the good times, but the little things that make you crazy, she could come back, and she would always have that, she'd bring you right back. She'd bring you right back with a smile. The other things, Bill alluded to, her love of literature, her love of books. I always admired that, and then it was one of the things I really like to share. And I know if there's anybody here from the Concordia and her book group, I know she really liked that. I love to talk with her about books. We shared a favorite book, the book by Immortals, A Gentleman in Moscow, and we would talk about that, and we'd talk about all kinds of stuff. And so, she could make you laugh, but she had a serious side. And she was an entertaining person, but she was also a person of substance. And so certainly, like I say, all these years later, I considered myself very fortunate to get in with Liz and Carl, and the family, the Morans, and we had so many good times there at Thanksgiving. It was just been, and I see so many of them here that came, and it's just been such a blessing. So we'll miss her, but I think her thoughts would be, just kind of go on, continue, have that good time, keep smiling, and when I think of Liz, I'm going to smile too.
And this is Liz's granddaughter, Emma.
So I'm going to share some of my favorite memories with my grandma. When I was younger, most of my memories are of spending time with my grandparents at their house in Pittsburgh over the summer and at Christmas time. They had a little Snoopy ice maker that I always enjoyed using in the summer, eventually with my sister Isa. On 4th of July, we would have angel food cake with berries and whipped cream. We also would make trips to Eaton Park for the smiley face cookies, though I will say as I got older, the Eaton Park appeal did wear off a little bit. Also fond memories of going to Idlewild Park as well. As I got older, one thing I really enjoyed was exploring my grandparents' attic with my grandma. I have some particularly funny memories of trying on my grandpa's old clothing and having quite a laugh because the legs of the pants were actually the right length on me. We also looked through all of the old books up there, of which there were many, and I remember reading some of them at her house. I also have many great memories of Deep Creek Lake, our annual family vacation that we've taken for, I think, almost 20 years at this point. Grandma enjoyed her wildflower walks, puzzles, and giving very specific instructions on how to dock the boat, though it's questionable as to whether these instructions were correct. We also did a book exchange on the trip, and last year I got to help her pick out all of the books. Another memory I have of being in Deep Creek is that was the first time that I had my license, so I drove my grandma somewhere myself, and she was in the passenger seat. And after the drive, I received the very high praise of, "You're not a bad driver." Take that as a high compliment there. Some of my more recent memories with my grandma are when her, my mom, and I would be together. There was always lots of laughter. I also enjoyed some more quiet mornings with her in Pittsburgh at the Concordia, where we would chat about books and what was happening in the world. I had recently read a book called Diary of an 83-and-a-quarter-old Man and shared some of the funny anecdotes from that book with her, and she had begun reading it too. She always had a great sense of humor. I will miss her very much, and am very lucky to have had 22 wonderful years with her.
Going to open things up now for a few minutes for anyone who is here who would like to share a brief story or personal remembrance about Liz. If you would like to come on up to the microphone if you can, or if you can't, I can bring the microphone to you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Well, I'm at that stage of life when all moments are senior moments, so I'll be using my notes. I'm Liz's sister-in-law for over 65 years. Actually, I met Liz before she was my sister-in-law, when her brother, Mike, and I were dating. And a couple of our dates were driving Liz from Buffalo to Potsdam, where she was going to school, far up in New York State. And I learned something about Liz on one of those trips. She was sitting in the back seat, and all of a sudden she screamed, and then suddenly she vaulted from the back seat into the front seat. She had seen a spider. And I think that was the most athletic thing I ever saw Liz do in 65 years. And her spider phobia continued lifelong, as far as I know. Liz and I were both librarians. So over the years, we discussed the joys and some of the difficulties of dealing with library clientele. We also happily exchanged, recommendation of good reads, and who doesn't appreciate that? We both joined Unitarian churches with our spouses, so we agreed on most of the important things in life. And when we didn't agree, we had stimulating discussions in the UU tradition. Mike and I and Carl and Liz spent many family events in Western New York and in Pittsburgh and traveled to many destinations over the years. And what we always had was a lot of fun and laughs, really good times together. We enjoyed botanical gardens, museums, art galleries, and the theater. We hiked parks and nature trails. However, I correct myself, we never hiked. We sauntered. And we rented cottages on Silver Lake and in the Finger Lakes. And Liz and I put up with the ineptitude of our husbands on any waterway. They would happily motor away with their fishing poles and their six-packs to catch the biggies. And when Liz and I were first annoyed that they weren't back after a long time, and then worried about where the heck they could be, we would see them on the horizon rowing back because they couldn't get the motor started. It was perfectly fine, but they couldn't get it started. And just the mention of pontooning on the Pymatuning will bring smiles to the faces of all those people over there. Our kids bonded with one another on all of these adventures, and though now geographically separated, they still take any opportunity they can to be together. It's so nice to have supportive and agreeable partners on your long journey through life. I was lucky to have Liz for one of those partners, and I will savor my Liz memories for the rest of my days.
Any others who'd like to share a brief remembrance or story?
Hello, my name is Kathy Gellner, and I am Carl's niece, and of course Liz's as well. I was one of those from the Bergmann line who grew up in Missouri. And I remember very well after Carl and Liz got married, and the summer afterwards, Uncle Carl and Aunt Liz drove to Missouri to meet all the relatives there. And I should check the dates, but I think I was probably in upper grade school, maybe high school by then. And I remember very plainly how exotic Aunt Liz seemed to us with her Irish ancestry, red hair, and especially her upstate New York accent. I remember my two sisters and I sitting in the back seat of the car as we drove around St. Louis with them and just laughing at Aunt Liz when she would say, Carl, because to us it was Carl, and we'd say, she said Carl. And even years afterwards, I could always hear Carl. We didn't get to spend that much time with Carl and Liz as we did with some of our other relatives, but we did visit them in Milwaukee while they were there, and here in Pittsburgh several times. And then 10 years ago, my husband and I retired to Gettysburg, and so I was very happy to get a chance to see Carl and Liz a little bit more often than I had when I was younger. So I will always have very fond memories of Aunt Liz.
Any others who would like to share at this time? We will have a chance to continue sharing memories and stories in the fellowship time that will take place right after this service. As Bill mentioned, both he and Beverly grew up going to the Julia Ward Howe Elementary School, as did my own daughter. And Bill mentioned that Julia Ward Howe was an abolitionist and a women's rights activist. She was also a Unitarian. And we are going to attempt to sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic today. So I invite you, I'll get the words up on the screen in just a moment here, but I invite you to rise either in body or spirit and join us as we sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling at the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have built in him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with the glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, he has died to make men free, while God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
Please be seated. Liz's granddaughter Carly will offer our closing words. This is Desiderata that we heard about earlier, which Liz often shared with her children.
Go placidly amid the noise and the haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to the others, even to the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexatious to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career. However humble, it is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself, especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune, but do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be. And whatever your labors are and aspirations, in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful, strive to be happy.
As I mentioned earlier, we're going to have refreshments and a time of sharing next door in our fellowship hall, and I hope that you'll stay for a while to connect with the others who are here. As we leave, Buddy will play another song that was in Liz's piano repertoire, Bendemeer's Stream. I will close with these words. Let us honor the life of Liz Bergmann by living ourselves more nobly and lovingly in the days ahead. As you return to the routines of your lives, go in peace, and may an abiding peace go with you. Amen.